Well, hello, welcome to the barn here at Glenkellin in Monmouthshire, another fantastic landmark trust property. We're not in the house today, we are in this beautiful courtyard of buildings and we're concentrating on Victorian food. So everything from the early 19th century to the end of the 19th century, a time of big change. Right in the middle, we've got the Industrial Revolution, so we've got loads of stuff going on with the ability to buy food in bulk and much more of it from all around the world. So I've got lots of things to be getting on with. I've got to line a mould here, and I've got a recipe that I'll be doing just shortly, so I've got to get that on the go. But what are you going to be doing, Kathy?
So today we're going to be looking at Victorian Christmas food, or at least the dishes they ate around Christmas, in the hopes that perhaps it might inspire you to add one or two dishes to your Christmas dinner table. The first thing I'm going to make is actually called a Christmas pudding. As a rule, plum puddings, without any plums, were eaten traditionally in the wintertime, throughout the wintertime. They weren't dedicated just for Christmas Day. But as the Victorian times progress, then the word Christmas is added to one or two of these puddings, and as a rule, they have a lot less sugar. So the recipe I'm going to be using today is one of my favourites for the plum pudding, for the Christmas pudding, and it comes from a lady's recipe book called Eliza Acton. She's one of my favourite recipe books as well. So it's a relatively easy pudding to make. We're going to start with pretty much equal measure of breadcrumbs here and flour, and then equal measures of suet, beef suet, currants, and raisins. They're raisins. These ones are currants. Now we've got our beef suet, our raisins, our currants, our flour, our breadcrumbs. Now we need to have not a huge amount of sugar. Now the sugar is the white sugar, that's what I'm using, so it's going to give your Christmas pudding a much lighter colour than modern Christmas puddings, which are really quite dark and sticky. As a rule, this Christmas pudding is going to be drier, more cake-like, and I certainly prefer it that way. Add a little pinch of salt, and there are all the dry things that go into this. I'll give it a stir just to mix them up. And now let's think about some of the wet ingredients. Now I'm going to add some apples. We want about an apple and a half, which I'll just very quickly here mince up. These, I quite like the apple bits to be large because it adds a texture and moisture to it. Although the recipe does say you should mince finely the apple. So I'll add that one there. Naturally, you're going to want to have some alcohol in it, and this one has a wine glass full of brandy to go in it as well. Oh, there's some nice chunky bits of apple going in now. Now, a pudding like this you can do in a traditional way. You can brandy. You can line a pudding cloth with some butter and roll it up and make a nice traditional shaped pudding. You could, if you wanted, steam it in a mould and make a nice traditional shape of it. There are lots of moulds in a Victorian kitchen, and they weren't just for jelly. You could put a sponge cake in a mould. You could put plum pudding in a mould. Or, as I'm doing today, you can just grease a pudding basin. And so I've already lined it with butter.
You can do savoury ones as well, can't you?
Yes, you can do. Do you mean in a cloth?
No, in moulds.
Yes, you can put anything in a mould.
Potted meats and things like that.
You could put ice cream in a mould. You could put anything you like in a mould. And, oh, I've got some very dirty eggs here. Let's put 3 eggs in here as well. And the last one, not with that bit of shell. Don't need that. There we go. I'll just give them a bit of a whisk. Would you mind awfully, Griff, passing me a fork?
I can do that.
Pick that bit of apple up I dropped on the floor. The last thing I'm then going to add is just a pinch of mixed spice, just to give it a nice Christmassy flavour. So let's put that in there. My nice little spice caddy here. Pinch of mixed spice. And there we are. Give that a good mix up. It's taking on the nice colour of the eggs. The eggs had a lovely yellow to them. And the smell of that brandy is giving it a good, rich smell. And now that it is truly mixed, I can put it in my basin. It will take about 3.5 hours to steam. And naturally, once it's done, it will keep for some time. But in the Victorian kitchen, especially a large Victorian kitchen for a nobleman, it is unlikely it will be left for long, because most winter meals would involve a pudding similar to this. So we're nearly there. Last bits. Oh, there's a really juicy bit of apple there. Now I'm just going to line it with a piece of paper, bit of brown paper to go on the top, and then I shall wrap my muslin over it. And we can then use this very modern oven that we have beside us here. Just do a little pleat just in case it gives a bit of a rise. Griff, could I borrow a finger just to put in there for me? Or a spoon.
I'm going to socially distance my finger.
Yes.
There you go.
Lovely, thank you.
Are we there?
We are, yes.
Great.
And go. Perfect. I'm going to tie it up like this, because then it'll give it a bit of a handle to use. So I can lift it in and out of the pan when it's done. So there it is, and I've got a pan of water. I want the water to be up about halfway. I've already got my water in there. Sit it in, put the lid on top. I'll put it on the back so Griff can use that one for his pudding. And I'll put the temperature up quite high to begin with, get it going and then turn it down. You just need to keep an eye on it and keep it at a rolling boil. Oh, and here I have one I've made earlier that I've put in a mould, you see. So you can create them to form different shapes. But that one will be done in about 3 hours, just over, and then we can turn it out and see what that looks like.
I like having them for breakfast.
Yes.
Leftover pudding,
You could
fried in butter.
Yes, very nice.
Yeah, very nice.
Yes.
And
So
again, very Victorian.
That's my Christmas pudding. But if you're not keen on Christmas pudding, and I do recommend you try this one because it is more cake-like than it is from our modern, I find modern Christmas puddings just a little bit sticky and stick at the back of the throat. This one is more cake, in a cake texture.
It's just lighter, isn't it?
It is lighter.
Modern
Sugar
Christmas puddings
helps
are just
as well.
like, oh,
Yes.
after all that meat and vegetables and gravy and everything else and bread sauce, and it's like, oh, please, no, you know.
Don't want the Christmas pudding as well. So I recommend trying this one if you're not keen on Christmas puddings. But if you really, really, really don't want a Christmas pudding, then I recommend this pudding that Griff is about to do because it's a great alternative.
Right, thank you. I look forward to eating yours in a short while. Now, this is called Nesselrode pudding. Now, at the start of the 19th century, there was a German nobleman, Count von Nesselrode, a baron. Anyway, a chef made a pudding for him, and this is it. And it's got, as its main ingredient, we've got chestnuts. Now, I know chestnuts are traditional, but it's always with your Brussels sprouts and bits of bacon and stuff like that. But this is going to be used for a pudding. So these have already been boiled, been cooked, and very often we cook them in a syrup as well, so they start absorbing some of the sugar. And then we puree them and we put them through a sieve. So this is my chestnut paste here. But there's other stuff that goes into it as well. We've got cream, we've got sugar, we've got some fruit, and we've got gelatin. It's going to be basically like a jelly mould with lots and lots of different coloured fruits dropped into it. So I've been slicing up some lemon peel, which I've peeled off. I should point out that although Kathy is dressed as a Victorian cook, I'm actually dressed as a chef, a very identifiable uniform. And it's around this time that starts to come in. The whole sort of brigade system you get in hotels, so all the different departments doing one different thing, that's when it all starts, in the Victorian period. So a lot of the stuff that I've been used to doing when I was working in hotels and stuff is all to do with a lot of French cooks from the 19th century. So what I'm now going to do, because I'm so ready, I am what we call mise en place, to get ready. Everything is weighed out, mostly thanks to Kathy this morning. So it's going to be much, much easier for me to work than just randomly having to run around and get ingredients. So, most important, I have in my saucepan here, my little pan, I have some nice fresh cream. Into that I'm going to put my sugar. We're going to put all these recipes up, so there will be chance for you to download them and look at them and try them yourself at home. So in goes the sugar, there we are, and then I am going to put in the lemon rind. That'll give it some extra flavour. Let's move that off to there.
You'll want the heat, will you?
I will be needing the heat on, yes. So, and then in this bowl here, we have some gelatin that I've been soaking. So I think that's probably soaked enough, actually. I think I'll probably just put that straight in. Squeeze the water out. There we go. Of course, this is still animal-based gelatin. There we are. Right, so that's all the gelatin in. Let's take a spoon. And we're putting that one on. Now I'm putting it to a sort of a low to medium heat. What I don't want to do is burn the sugar, and I certainly don't want to split the cream. I don't want to curdle the cream. So I'm just going to warm it through very, very gently, keeping it stirring the whole time, making sure it's not going to burn or catch on the bottom. Just a little bit of steam coming off of it, but not too much. But the trick is to get all those two things done. I need to melt the gelatin and I need to melt the sugar as well. In here I have a little bit of vanilla essence. Very nice. I'm not going to put too much in.
Griff was talking earlier about gelatine. Now traditionally, and certainly in the beginning of the Victorian age, then these would have been made by trotters or calves' feet. But as the world has progressed, in Victorian times you could get most things, certainly by 1860 onwards, out of packets. So you'd be able to get gelatine, very similar to the way that we can get it today, in a packet. You can get most things, food colouring in a packet. Obviously all the spices are available from around the empire. And so these things make cooking and creating dishes that require set creams, jellies, ice creams a lot easier and more available to all walks of life, so long as you could afford it.
Yeah, we really are into the time of mass production, so sugar was consumed in vast quantities. In fact, if you were in the lower classes, that was one of the things you could get lots and lots of. It was incredibly cheap. I read of somebody's grandmother around the time of the First World War, so a little bit later than that, but she was taking eight spoonfuls of sugar in her tea every day. So this is just starting to melt. I can still feel some of the gelatin in there, but it is starting to go, and there's no more crunchiness of sugar in here either. But it's very lucky for me doing this slowly over a nice electric hob. If you imagine in the Victorian times, if I'm doing this in a big hotel, it was actually quite a nasty, dangerous, dirty and hazardous job. My health would suffer because, in fact, underneath here would be a little bucket almost of burning coal, of charcoal. All the fumes would be coming up. There'd be a lot of carbon monoxide being produced. There would be hopefully ventilation up there, but not all of them. Even the great kitchens at Buckingham Palace weren't really brought up to scratch, even in Queen Victoria's time. We're waiting for a celebrity chef, Monsieur Soyer, who came along and invented an awful large amount of the wonderful ways of cooking that we have now. And one of his big inventions was the Sawyer stove, which really helped the efficiency of cooking food and also the health of the chefs as well.
Yes, you have more control nowadays, don't you? Although everyone would have got to know their own stove, their own range. And a lot of the recipes that you find written talk about a medium fire or a low fire, a small fire, and that just relates to whether it's hot or medium or cooler.
Now this is now come into a sort of a very thin custard, so I can tell that everything has melted.
Brilliant. So shall I do-si-do back?
Let's do
so
a swap over.
Come back to your working station.
Go. And I'm going to keep it stirring just a little bit, because this is a nice traditional copper saucepan. It will retain the heat for quite some time. If I just forget about it, there's enough heat in there just to keep going and maybe scorch the bottom. Once it's scorched, you're in trouble.
So this dish is Nesselrode pudding. It's very seasonal. It's quite exciting, especially in our modern tastes. What is it that's in there that we're going to find interesting?
Well, the chestnut is the unusual thing. It's a real novelty, so I would suggest you all give it a try at least once, and have it as an alternative to somebody who doesn't want a big, heavy, traditional, modern Christmas pudding. But what I need to do is combine the chestnut with some cold cream first. So let's move that off just briefly to there. Now I'm going to mix that in the bowl. So in goes our chestnut. There we go. And luckily you can now buy chestnut pulp, because chestnuts are fiddly to peel and fiddly to cook. So modern methods, we can buy them in packets like this, and I'm just going to put the cream in. There we are.
Naturally, in a kitchen, you'd have a kitchen maid who would be able to do all those basic chores.
Are you volunteering?
No.
No.
There's nothing more tedious than pushing chestnuts through a sieve. I have done it before.
It's the number of processes that are in some dishes is quite phenomenal, and sieving, as you've mentioned, is one of them that just gets dull and repetitive. And you know, we're doing small amounts. Imagine if you were working in a large house. If you're working in a large hotel, then you're talking about making food for, you know, dozens or many dozens, hundreds of people possibly at a big formal occasion. So, you know, if you're imagining you're making the food for Queen Victoria's wedding or some big important civic feast in the Guildhall in London, then you're talking about an awful large amount of chestnuts to sieve.
And they don't really like lumps or bits in their dishes, the Victorians, which traditionally we don't mind so much. So to be honest, this then needs to go through, well, the heated milk then needs to go through yet another process of muslin to take out the lumps. But I think we should keep them in. It makes it more interesting.
Well, it's nearly there. So you can now see it's coming into a bit more of a light coloured paste. Don't be sort of discouraged by the fact that your chestnuts, when you get them out of the packet, the pulp is a light browny grey colour. It doesn't look very appetising at all. It doesn't look like the sort of colour food that you'd even feed to cats and dogs. But don't worry, it will get lighter, it will get prettier, because we're going to add in a lot of other things as well. There we are, and it'll get easier.
This is actually another recipe which you could find in Eliza Acton. So she's a very popular, certainly with me, cookbook, her Modern Cookery of 1860. It's also a recipe you'll find a lot for ice cream. So you can make the same recipe, just add eggs and make it more of an ice cream consistency. Naturally, you'll need to use ice. In fact, I'm using ice today because I'm attempting to make a jelly. At the moment, it's really warm in here, so I'm really struggling to get it set. But over here, just while Griff finishes off his mixing, I have the makings of a champagne jelly. So I've just taken my mould, I've lined it with a modern substitute for oil, which is what the Victorian recipes call for. I'm using Trex, which is you can get in any supermarket, and is vegetable based, so it won't taste or taint the set creams or jellies that you're making. So here I have a bowl of ice. The heat in here is taking a toll on it, so it's taking quite a long time. I've heated up some champagne, because it's a champagne jelly. So I've melted some gelatine in it and some sugar, and I've got a layer of jelly setting in here already. It's not quite at the consistency I'd like. Obviously we have an element in modern day that I could go and use. It might have to go in a fridge just for a few moments, just to counterbalance the heat that's in this room. But I'll pack down some more ice with it. Then once it's still tacky, but not completely set, I'm going to add a layer of raspberries. So a little bit later today, during this film, hopefully, I'll be laying out some raspberries, and then I can pour on the rest of my jelly mix and then let that set. The reason you need to leave it so it's tacky is because otherwise when you turn it out, they'll come in two separate bits and you'll have two set jellies. So I'm ever hopeful that this is going to set, despite the heat in here. So I shall just move that back because Griff looks like he's moving on to his next stage.
So I've got my puree and my cream nicely mixed. And the next thing to do is add this cream with the gelatin and the sugar and the vanilla and the lemon in. The lemon's gone, it's made it go a lovely
it's nice yellow colour. And how does it smell? Can you smell it?
Yeah, I've got a little bit of lemon and a little bit of vanilla, so it's working really well.
It's really nice.
Right, now I'm going to add this in, and I'm just going to make a little well in the middle. I'm going to pour it in carefully. I don't want it to splash back at me. Of course, the problems that Kathy is having with her ice cream wouldn't be too much of a problem. In a nice big Victorian kitchen, you'd have a nice, specially chilled, or at least the coolest part of the hotel kitchen would be reserved. It would all be walled off, and there'd be buckets and buckets of ice being brought in. Queen Victoria was buying ice from Canada, and she was having it sailed across the ocean. Yeah. So, you know, if you're well off, you can do all sorts of things. If you've got the money and happen to own half the world.
Or have an ice house.
Or have an ice house,
great houses would have ice houses. Yeah. And so really the makings of the jelly, I'm making jelly, the jellies that I'm making, and the set creams, the ability to make these and to mould them and to serve them was almost a status symbol. Certainly in the countryside it would show that you had an ice house, and in London it would show that you've brought in ice which you can get delivered. So they become very much part of nearly every grand dinner.
Now, I need to put this into my greased mould. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to add all the other bits and pieces, the chopped fruit, there's some candied peel there. I could put in raisins, currants, very often you could put in angelica as well, the green stalks that have been candied. If you bung everything in at the same time, all of your fruit will simply sink to the bottom and may even not coalesce and not chill down, so that it could just fall apart. So I'm going to do is put a little bit in here, get that almost setting. It's a bit like the technique that Kathy's having to use before she puts her strawberries in or her raspberries. And I'm then going to add in a few fruit then. So what I'm going to do is pour it into the mould, not too much.
It's time consuming, and that's really the whole point, is for high status dishes, it doesn't matter how long it takes. You've got staff to do it, and those who work in the kitchens, that's all they're doing, is cooking from morning till evening.
There's something else that's quite important. All of our fruits will have been soaked in a spirit, so something like brandy or a kirsch, rum even, something like that. And that has two really important things that are going on. One, it tastes much, much better with some lovely spirit-infused fruit, but also the alcohol in them won't freeze. So what you're going to get is a nice solid frozen mass of your moulded pudding, but inside that are going to be some little bits of fruit that actually are still soft, so you've got those different textures going on as well. So I'm going to need to go and put this in the little freezer next door.
You are.
So,
fridge, but just put it in the fridge.
Put it in the fridge next door, yeah. There we go.
Yeah, just to let it set.
So I've filled it up just so it's about half full, well maybe a third full, and when it starts setting I'll put in the rest of my fruit.
Now, as you can see, I've got some patty pans here, which I've lined, greased with butter already, because yes, I'm now going to make mince pies. Now, for those of you who watched our Tudor Christmas video, you'll know that traditionally mince pies had mince in it. And throughout the Victorian period, this slightly changes. So if you, in Victorian times, wanted to be old-fashioned, then you could still have meat in your mincemeat, a lot less of it than in the Tudor times, a lot more sugar involved in Victorian mince pies. But towards the end, towards the end of the Victorian age, the meat starts to fade out. Now there are lots and lots of different mincemeat recipes in the many, many, many Victorian cookbooks that were available at the time. And I've cooked quite a few. There's a lovely lemon mincemeat in Eliza Acton. So I thought I'd try something I'd never done before. And so I was working my way through the mincemeat recipes and I found an ingredient that I thought was really intriguing. So that's what I'm going to make today. Now, as I mentioned, sugar is used. So there's all my sugar. And then we do have beef suet in it. So there's some beef suet to go in. Then our fruit, we've got some raisins. All of the raisins, there we are. And some currants. I'll just give them a bit of a stir. Some peel. You could use mixed peel. I've just got orange peel here. And I'm going to add the spice. This recipe only has one spice. Unfortunately for me, it is my least favourite spice. So if they're really successful and I like them, I might change the spice to nutmeg. But for now, I'm going to follow the recipe to the letter and add in some cloves, just a pinch of cloves. Just a little pinch, not that keen. There we are. Now, if you were working in a big Victorian kitchen and you had kitchen maids and lots of dishes to make, you would have the luxury of having a wonderful Victorian garden. The Victorian kitchen garden was an integral part of making sure that your lord or whoever you cooked for was catered for well. And so these wonderfully productive Victorian kitchens could produce all sorts of things, and they would always have an orchard. So plums and pears and apples would be grown in abundance, and lots of different types. So as a Victorian cook, a professed one who was a professional cook, you had access to lots of different types of pears and apples. This recipe asks specifically for a russet apple. It says because they are slightly less watery than other types. Now, you can get russets in modern times, but you do have to search, so check out your local greengrocer to see if he or she has any. So I have found them. They are delightful. So I have one russet apple to go in with this as well. Just like my Christmas pudding, I've left my apple quite large in its pieces. There we are. I shall give that a stir. So we've got pretty much everything in it now, apart from the alcohol required and my intriguing ingredients. So let's put that one in first, and that is this. The recipe says add some orange marmalade, and I quite like the idea of that. So I shall put that in. Stir that in. There's so much sugar though, I do wonder whether the flavour of it will be lost, but we will see. And now for the alcohol. Now I'm actually making half the recipe, so this is half the recipe. And it does say that once you've made it, you can keep it for quite some time. So half the recipe, well the whole recipe asks for a quarter pint of brandy, and the same of sherry, although if you have a little more brandy, it doesn't matter. So I need 1/8 of a pint, I suppose, of each. I'm not really sure what 1/8 of a pint looks like, but shall we just guess? I'll put a bit of brandy in, and a bit of sherry, and then see what the consistency looks like. We want it to be quite moist. Now, traditionally, high-status Victorian mince pies would have puff pastry, certainly on the top, or you could make the mince pies without a top. You can do it as you like. I think today I'm going to put short crust on the bottom and puff on the top. And luckily I've made my pastry already. So now I've mixed it. While Griff talks about his next recipe, I can get on and cut out, what do I think? Do I want a little bit more? I might put just a little bit more brandy in. That's better. It definitely feels right now.
Right, so while Kathy has been working on her mix over there, I've actually just put a bit of more fruit into the Nesselrode pudding, but I'm going to finish it off now. It's starting to go solid, so there's lots of fruit already in there, nicely mixed in. So let's put the last bits in there. So in goes some of the cherries. There we are. I'm going to give it a good stir as well, because I don't want them all sticking together in a clump. Some of our mixed peel, there we go. So just give that a little bit of a stir. And there we are, it's nicely mixed in. There we are. And I've chosen the right size mould. Ha There we are. Kathy, I've got to crack on with this. Would you be able to run that into the fridge for me? Now, something really, really popular in Victorian times, macaroons. A lot of our recipes use more egg yolks than egg whites, so we very often have lots and lots of egg whites left over. So I'm going to do some whisking of some egg whites, into which I'm going to add some sugar and also some almonds as well. I've also toasted a few almonds, some of the flaked almonds, and crunched them up as well, because I want these to be quite crunchy macaroons. And I found a recipe which is called shamrock macaroons, and they actually, you colour them green and put them into the shape of a three-petaled shamrock and cook them together. Unfortunately, I don't have any green food colouring, so I'm going to do pink shamrocks. So what I need to do is these spare egg whites that I've got here. Now, absolutely vital. First of all, get yourself a really nice, good copper bowl. This is a really good old vintage one, and it's got some weight to it. Get a thin, flimsy one that could only be steel with a bit of copper lining. They're not as good. They still work, but they're not as good. This is a proper pastry chef's copper bowl. It's obviously seen some action, this one. Yes. Yeah, fantastic. So, but the most important thing about this is that it is spotlessly clean. Everything to do with whisking egg whites has to be clean, free of grease. There's no fat, there's nothing. I've got my hands nice and clean. A single tiny bit of grease in there, and you could be whisking until, till Christmas several centuries in the future, and nothing's going to happen. Now then, of course, nowadays we've got lots of labour-saving devices, food mixing machines and whisks and all that sort of stuff. They don't really come until the 20th century. So even up until almost the First World War, you're still mixing by hand. So here we go, nice balloon whisk, and start going. When I was working in pastry sections in big hotel kitchens and posh country houses and stuff, you'd still be doing it this way. But you can see it's frothing up quite nice and quickly. There we are. Now, of course, there's lots of traditions that come in around the time of the Victorian era. It's pretty much Charles Dickens and A Christmas Carol that starts putting the standard formed Christmas into everybody's minds. There we are, we're getting up to what we call stiff peak. So it's coming up, and the peak is still staying where it is. There we are. There we go. I can actually go on with that. And as long as there's no egg white coming around at the bottom. Nope. I've done that pretty fast. I'm quite impressed with that. So I am now going to gently put in some sugar. Not too much. I'm going to do this by eye, but if you download the PDFs on the website, it'll be done with more exact ingredients for you. There we are. I don't want the macaroons to... I'm just going to fold it in very, very gently.
So it's during the Victorian times that we get the beginnings of some of our modern traditions, like Christmas cards.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that when you went visiting before the post office really got going, you would have a carte de visite, a visit card that you'd present to the butler at the door. And in 1843, Henry Cole, who was then the director of the Victorian Albert Museum, found that not only could he had just so many Christmas greetings to reply to, he couldn't get out and visit people and hand his card and say, you know, say the master of the house, I've popped round to visit. So he got one of the artists who he knew, who was working at the V&A, to paint himself a little Christmas scene, and said to his assistants, go and send these out, and I can say that I've sort of, I'm thinking of you at Christmas. And that literally is the first Christmas card. So beautiful scene of lots of animals having Christmas fun. There we are, a bit more sugar to go in there.
And that starts the trend for that kind of...
I think he produces several hundred, and by the next year, of course, all his friends go, this is a great idea, and all of a sudden you've got a Christmas card industry that's sprung up, and they're producing thousands and then tens of thousands, and now I don't know how many produce, must be millions and millions by now, so there we are. So we're getting there.
Christmas, still, just in the Tudor times, it's still very much a time of year, not just the one day. The 12 days of Christmas are still very much honoured, and you have a 12th cake. So your fruit cake really tends to be towards the cake that celebrates the Christmas period. It tends to be on the 12th day, although towards the end, from about the 1880s onwards, the idea of a plum cake, again without plums, begins to take hold, and some houses start to have rather heavy fruit cake that's beautifully decorated for Christmas, with a Christmas greeting on the front as well.
So you can now see it's starting to come together, a little bit thicker, but it's still, it's still nice and thick. So a bit more sugar. I'm doing this as lightly as possible. I want to keep the air in, so I'm not smashing all the ingredients together with a wooden spoon. So it's best to sort of fold it in. If you have done it in a food mixer, then you can just put it together in with a metal spoon rather than just doing it with a whisk. But this, of course, is my mixer as well as my mixing bowl. So, right, so I'll put that half there. I'm going to keep that white. So I'm going to colour this with just a little bit of food colouring. Of course, food colouring's been around for centuries. Victorian times. It's nice and easy to get hold of. I don't want too much. I want these to be pink. So my aim is to make some of those little macaroons that you now buy all together in a little box, all fancy.
So what about some of the other Christmas traditions? What about Christmas trees?
Well, what everybody at home will be saying, I know this one. Prince Albert brought the Christmas tree over, but unfortunately, no, he didn't. There are records of Christmas trees, certainly within the royal family, going right back to the time of, I think, George III or IV. So what he did was Prince Albert arranged for a photograph to be taken of all the royal family together next to a Christmas tree, and sent those out as greetings cards.
And did they appear in the newspaper? Is that right?
Yes, I think they did as well. So, and from that moment on, everyone went, oh, the royal family's got one of these. We want some of these. Now then, I've got to get the meringue from my bowl onto the baking.
Can I put these in the oven before you carry on?
Yes, of course.
So I've put short crust on the bottom, puff pastry on the top, covered it with an egg wash. The oven hasn't yet been heated up, so maybe I'll heat that first, just there, and leave these on, and then I shall stick them in once it's heated. While you're doing that, I'm going to layer my raspberries onto my jelly. So the jelly has set now, and it's a little wobbly and a little tacky, and I'm now going to layer some raspberries in it, just to make a layer of suspended fruit in the middle. There we are. Once I've poured the next lot on, I shall cheat a little and put it in a modern fridge, so we shouldn't have to wait quite so long for it to set. The problem with using a fridge when you're making layer jelly or suspended fruit jelly is that you can forget about it, and then it will set too quickly and you'll have trouble turning it out.
So I've done lots of little macaroons there. A bit more food colouring in this. There we are. In it goes.
Well, that's a good colour.
It is a nice colour. I'm happy with that. Right, I better get this into the oven quick because they'll start to flatten out. This isn't actually a Victorian, this is probably the oldest apart from the Yule log, the oldest tradition that we, certainly one we can eat, and I'm going to do a wassail cup or wassail bowl. So in my bowl here I've already got some mace, some ginger, cloves and some cinnamon, and I'm going to grate a nutmeg. So I think you've got everything about Christmas in that bowl there, haven't you? So
gorgeous smells.
So and Kathy has got a rather wonderful Victorian spice caddy. Now these, you can get these in junk shops and things, but unusually she still has her little nutmeg grater in the middle there. So they normally get lost over the years. So I'm just going to grate some nutmeg in here. So what is wassail? Well, it's like a spiced punch. I'm using wine for this recipe. There are recipes for bread, cider, all sorts of things. So there we are. So I've got my wassail liquid on there. That's the wine, the spices and the sugar. That's gently warming through. Now I really want this no warmer than almost just above body heat, because I'm now going to start adding in eggs. And this recipe calls, if you're using a bottle of wine, you need to have 3 eggs. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put in the egg yolk first of all. So I'm just going to keep the egg white back, because I also need to put that in. There we are. But I don't want the skin in, so what I'm going to do, eggs are pretty tough things, and I'm just going to nick. There we are. There we are. So keep. Because this is a wassail cup, what it isn't is scrambled eggs in wine. So it needs to be the temperature kept very low indeed. There we are. So keep.
My gingerbread, I've just added some melted butter. And then you saw me playing with an egg. I really didn't want a whole egg. I only wanted a fraction of an egg. And yet still a little wet. So I'm just going to add some flour to it. I want a dough-like texture really, because I'm going to roll it out like a pastry and then cut it into shapes. And I haven't quite decided what shapes. Probably just the cooker cutters for today, although I might try and make some leaf shapes as well. But I'll just get some extra flour.
Now the egg yolks are in, I am going to slightly get it warmer and warmer. It should really be steaming when it's coming out, a little bit of steam when it's being served. But again, if I cook it too quickly and too hot, I'm just going to get a load of curdled eggs in spicy wine, which is not what I want at all. So I'm now going to add in the egg white. And I'm going to whisk it a lot more vigorously. Not so vigorously it goes everywhere.
Another new Christmas tradition that is beginning to take hold in the Victorian age towards the end is gift giving. They don't, as a rule, tend to give gifts that often, but the wealthy might give a small trinket, a token gift to their children, maybe to their loved ones. The servants would be given gifts on Boxing Day. And you have to remember, in a big house, the servants wouldn't be able to celebrate Christmas on Christmas Day. They would have to celebrate after the family's Christmas. So there were often around Christmas time servant balls in the week after Christmas, either held on Boxing Day or probably a few days after. And that's when the servants had a chance to relax and let off steam, play Christmas party games, have a nice hearty meal. And in some occasions, that misrule element that we had in the Tudor times was still carried over in some households, and you would get the lord of the house or the master of the house serving the servants just for one evening.
So even now, in a modern Christmas, you do still get some people putting a silver penny maybe, or a bean in your Christmas pudding. Of course, then it would have been more likely a 12th cake, and you could have 3 or 4 different trinkets in there. And each trinket could relate to a character you would have to play for the rest of the day. So you'd have to impersonate a judge for the rest of the day, or a mayor, or the town drunk maybe. And you'd be given tasks to do. You'd have little mottos and jokes to read out. And you'd say, could father, who was playing the town drunk, pretend to fill and light a pipe? Do it in the most novel and comedic way possible. Now, of course, all these things now feed into our traditions of crackers that were starting to come in as well at the same time. So with the jokes and the mottos. But you can still sometimes see sets of playing cards with different characters on that you'd be handed out whenever you got a bean in your 12th cake or a silver coin. So that's a tradition, sadly, that's not quite there, but we still do charades and we still do the crackers as well.
The Victorian age is one where the idea of childhood and celebrating children and giving children a little more of a say within community is taking hold. So a lot more activities and focus was aimed on children, and that is really shown within the Christmas time when gifts are given, and Christmas cards, which we spoke of earlier, they often feature children out in the snow or in some festive pose. And no doubt this is all stems from the Queen and her attitude towards her family. If you think of Osborne House, they even have Swiss Cottage, where the children were allowed a building where they could learn to cook and they could have some space of their own. So it's a real age for children, and a coming of age really for children, and celebrating children. Well, I've made just enough gingerbread here to put in the oven to start off.
Would you like me to make way?
Yes, but I've taken over your space.
That's all right, because I'm going to step back, you're going to put those in there, and then you're going to, because I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but you're going to have a little taste of that with your finger, because that's actually really quite nice.
Very good. I'll put my gingerbread, just to start the ball rolling. We'll put a few in to begin with, and then I can roll out the rest and create some different shapes. Shall I taste it from here?
Yes.
Oh, that's really nice. That's really nice, isn't it? Do you know, I've never wassailed.
I have never used this recipe, so I think the wassails that I've had have been simply, mulled cider or wine. Yeah. They've never been a proper traditional,
well,
and again, traditional, what's traditional? But this particular recipe from the 1880s, I've never tried with the eggs. So
it's the adding of the eggs that frightened me.
And we've still got those apples to go in as well.
Oh,
so
yes.
we're going to put those in the bowl. I need a bowl.
Yeah.
The recipe does say to throw the apples in, but
let me get you a board then, so we don't burn the table. I'll leave you to do the throwing.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to put the apples in. There we are.
Well, you were brave enough to add eggs where I wouldn't have added eggs.
Yeah, so. It's a weird thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wine and eggs. It's an unusual thing, but this is, and it's also starting to thicken up really nicely. So there we are. Well, I can just leave that there for a second because I just want to, I want to see what's happened to my sugar. Aha! Okay, so that apple has fallen apart and has burst. So the sugar that was in there is now. Oh, that's going to be good. Apple, toffee, sugar.
Yeah.
Try some of that as well.
I love the Victorian age. I have such a sweet tooth. I'm going in there. Is that all right? Mm-hmm. And they're russets again.
They're russets. So
they're really a delightful apple.
So that one's fallen apart. That one's split open. But there are two here that actually have still got the sugar in a little pool in the middle. So let's see. There we are. Oh, I'm letting all the syrup go out. I don't want that to happen. There we are. So let's pour that in. There we are. So let's put those in. And of course, with the sugar that's in there, I could just warm this up again and the sugar will start flowing. There we are. So I'm now ready to pour over the top my wassail mixture. So you can see it's thickened up quite nicely. And that's the eggs that I've whisked in. That's going to be really warming. I can imagine coming into the great hall of the local manor house or the parsonage.
Oh, the smell. I've just brought my jelly out of the modern day fridge to give it a bit of a chill. You can see here that the raspberries are beautifully suspended in the jelly. So I'm going to put another layer off just to finish off so it's full, the mould's full. Then put it back in the fridge and let it set some more before I attempt to turn it out. Now I'm ready to turn out my Christmas pudding. Oh yes, good timing. The water had almost gone. Perfect timing. So it's had about 3.5 hours. I'll just use the spoon. So I've made the hook so I can just hook it out. And then I'll not have the patience to let it cool. But I can see that a Nesselrode pudding is on its way. So while I burn my fingers taking the string off.
You'd rather me burn my fingers?
No, I'm happy to do it. Would you like a plate?
Yes.
Turn it out on.
Yes. Now, this is called Nesselrode pudding. If it's set properly, it should just slide off. We might need you to use a bit of hot water, but you could also loosen it off with your fingers. Ah, yeah, it's coming.
Yeah, just work it away.
Yeah,
just a little bit
yeah.
of time. With the ceramic moulds, the hot water system doesn't really work. If you put ceramic moulds in, then it just melts where the water is. With the copper moulds, the warm water will conduct up the sides, but we should be able to get it to turn out just by working away. It's patience, to be honest. Work away at the edges, pull it away gradually, and then once you've got it away enough, gravity will do the rest. But patience is the most important thing.
It's nearly there.
Is it? See? Patience is... Shall we look at my Christmas pudding instead?
Yeah.
Look, so here we have my Christmas pudding. And I'll take the paper off and you can truly appreciate the different colour. It's nowhere near as dark as our modern puddings. I'm going to do the same, but because it's warm, I'm actually going to get a knife around the side of mine because it won't matter so much what you would do when you serve your Christmas pudding. Douse it in brandy and then set fire to it, which I was going to suggest, but I do notice that there are fire alarms and smoke detectors.
Do you have any top tips for getting it to come out like the Nesselrode?
Patience, and don't be too distressed if it's stuck at the bottom. But I've just begun to feel it coming, so there we have it.
Yay.
There we are. A little bit stuck, just on the top there. A bit of holly around the bottom, served with custard or cream. Any alcoholic creams, that would be nice. And as I say, pour brandy over it, set light to it. It'd be beautiful. It's a really nice Christmas pudding.
Well, it's been a fantastic bit of cooking here at Clenkellin. I can still smell your gingerbread cooking in there. I will tidy this table so we can clear and put everything out, but don't leave those to burn.
So like Griff says, I think we're ready. We're going to tidy up and then display all that we have prepared and talked about. So there we have a few dishes suitable for a Victorian Christmas dinner table. We've got our Christmas pudding, the gingerbread here, some of which I cut into leaf shape. Here we have some of Griff's macaroons. We have the mince pies, some Victoria sandwiches and Queen Drop biscuits.
And I have just finished decorating the Nesselrode pudding. So just a little bit of Angelica there, and you had some raspberries left over, so I thought that would fill that little hole in the middle.
That's great.
I wanted to keep them hanging on, I suppose, a bit of gelatin over the top as well, maybe just do a bit of a glaze, that'd be nice. So what else do we have here? We have our cheese seftons as well, a moulded Christmas pudding, so it doesn't have to be in a ball or on a basin like that. You could use a mould, and some orange wafers as well.
I think that's a perfect table. Just missing the meat course, obviously, with our beef.
Oh,
and
no
our
more food. This is enough for me. Oh, and we should.
Should we have some
toast the season with a
wassail?
wassail?
Look at these delicate cups we found. Although I would be tempted to take a whole apple, just a little bit. I think just a little.
Just a little bit.
Just.
So you're getting the apple a lot and the wine.
Because it's a bit of an off-putting colour, if you don't mind me saying, Griff. But it smells delightful.
Well, it's been all right for the Anglo-Saxons and everybody else in between up until now, so
Yes.
I think we can go. So cheers and a Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Okay, that's good. Yes, Merry Christmas, everybody,
Oh,
from
yes.
From us here at Clinkellen and everybody at Landmark Trust, we hope you have a lovely spread like this one.